and that intensity would go, because of course it disappears when you're close up. But clearly what's going on is that we look for and we love that feeling of intensity, that feeling of idolisation, and we just have this hunger for charisma.
You'll be hearing more throughout the series from Derren Brown, Moletsi Mbeki, Elisa Zendorfer, Abdelbari Atwan and Michael Kenny. They're amongst the voices attempting to articulate this most slippery of qualities that is at once unpredictable and formidable, as powerful today as 4,000 years ago. Then it was more broadly defined as a gift of leadership or poetry or love. The ancient Greek word charis means grace or gift. Charisma means a thing of endowed with grace. The first use of the specific term can be established, more or less. It occurs in the 1st century AD in a letter from St Paul to the Corinthians, part of the framework of early Christianity. The Reverend Richard Coles.
St Paul, in the first letter to the Corinthians, sets out a sort of scheme of gifts, those things which are markers of the presence of the Holy Spirit in the actions of believers. Gifts of discernment, gifts of prophecy, gifts of healing, gifts of miracles, the gift of tongues.
And was it important within all that those gifts should be for the common good?
I think the gifts are important for two reasons. One is that they are signs of the authentic nature of what's happening. They're endorsements, if you like, of the surprising and unique claims of this new breakaway sect from Judaism. And the second thing is that these are gifts for the church, for the emerging community of believers.
Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are varieties of services, but the same Lord, and there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. To one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the one Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the discernment of spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are activated by one and the same Spirit, who allots to each one individually just as the Spirit chooses.
That's quite a list, from the most subtle, wisdom for example, to the downright flamboyant, miracles speaking in tongues, manifestations that to rationalists verge on the supernatural. But were they familiar in the 1st century AD as St Paul was writing in the ripeness of the Roman world? Yash Elsner teaches classics at Corpus Christi College, Oxford. He describes the ecology of competing religions at the time.
It's a golden age of charismatic religious activity, of new cults, cults of Isis, cults of Mithras, Kybele. We don't know what these mysteries actually did, but there's a whole plethora of new religions, of reinvented old religions. I mean, you could say Christianity is a kind of reinvention of an old Judaism, for example, or Serapis or Apis the bull. Many, many cults being created in this world, and they are in a kind of competition with each other. If you look at the range of these religions, Paul's prescription of gifts of the Spirit and his description of charismatic activity is actually quite moderate.
Many of these distinctive gifts seem familiar from ancient Greece too, and specifically from a system that we associate with the elevation of certain individuals, maybe even to the status of saints, and that's the earlier practice of hero cults.
There's a kind of charisma, or maybe one might almost say sex appeal, of major figures, Alcibiades, Alexander and so forth. By the time you get to the Roman period, you have these loving descriptions of such figures, thinking of their bodies, the brightness of their faces, the colours of their eyes. All this kind of thing is presented in a kind of, well, I would say quite a charismatic way. There's a wonderful text by Philostratus called the Heroicus, which is a description of heroes envisaged, is still in a kind of state between living and dead, where they can be worshipped. And again, they're seen as larger than life. They're seen as vibrantly real and present, so that it's a very rich, imaginative world.
And that's it, a brief moment of definition in the 1st century. St Paul enumerates the charismatic gifts, or charismata. Then for nearly 2 millennia, the term, if not the idea, goes underground. It reappears in the early 20th century in the work of the German sociologist Max Weber. For him, charisma was no longer a strictly religious quality. It was an observable social event, particularly when associated with institutions.